Picture this, the golden age of Hollywood. Glamour, glitz, and stars who owned the world. But behind the silver screen, a darker story unfolded. Fame didn't guarantee fortune. Some of these icons crashed hard, dying in debt and despair. Take Ed Wood, broke, crashing on a friend's couch till his last breath. Billie Holiday, just 70 cents left when her voice faded. Judy Garland, a staggering $4 million in the red. We're peeling back the curtain on 22 heartbreaking tales of golden age actors who lost it all. From child stars to jazz legends, their stories will grip you. And number one's financial fall is a jaw-dropper you won't see coming. Buckle up, this is Hollywood's tragic flip side. Number 22, Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was a dynamo, singer, actor, comedian, dancer, a kid who conquered vaudeville before he could shave. By the 50s, he was a Rat Pack king, dazzling millions with that velvet voice and electric stage presence. Cash flowed, multiple mansions, a garage of sleek cars, jewelry that blinded. But Sammy lived beyond big. He lived reckless. To dodge taxes, he funneled piles of money into sketchy tax shelters. Think offshore scams promising big returns. They tanked spectacularly, and the IRS came knocking with a $15 million bill, crippling for even a star like him. By 1990, throat cancer gnawed at him. Yet he dragged himself on tour with Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli, desperate for cash. He died at 64 that year, his estate pegged at $4 million, peanuts against his debts. The IRS forced his widow, Alto Vise, to auction off his treasures. Homes, gems, memories, all gone. Mr. Show Business, they called him. But he exited penniless, a victim of lavish excess and financial flops. Number 21's tale will stun you. Number 21. Judy Garland. Judy Garland stole hearts as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Those ruby slippers launched a legend. Over decades, she belted out classics on stage and screen, reportedly banking $40 million, millions more in today's dollars. But by 1969, at just 47, she was buried under $4 million in debt. How? Her agents and a string of ex-husbands fumbled her fortune. Mismanagement was an understatement. Judy's heart was too big. She handed cash to friends, strangers, anyone with a sob story, draining her accounts faster than she could sing. Comeback tours, like her sold-out Palace Theater run in New York, brought hope. But the IRS swooped in, seizing chunks for unpaid taxes. In her final days, she shuffled through small club gigs, voice cracking, body exhausted, debts piling higher. When she overdosed in '69, Frank Sinatra paid for her funeral. Her daughter Liza Minnelli spent years untangling the mess. From Oz's rainbow to a financial storm, Judy's tale warns that even the brightest stars can dim under money woes. Number 20's collapse is a wild ride. Number 20. George Raft Hollywood.
They forget one thing. Some of the guys they send up are going to come out again sooner or later. They ought to make up their minds, either give them a chance or kill them off.
George Raft as the ultimate gangster star. Scarface in 32 and Some Like It Hot in 59 cemented his cool, sophisticated vibe. At his peak, he raked in $18,000 a week, millions in today's cash, living the high life with tailored suits and a slick persona. But off-screen, George was a gambling fiend. He blew stacks at racetracks, betting on horses that never crossed the line first. Card tables and casinos drained him too. He'd toss thousands on a single hand, grinning through the losses. Worse, he passed on roles like Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, parts that shot Humphrey Bogart to stardom, thinking they weren't his style. Bad calls and reckless bets eroded his career. By the mid-60s, debt towered over him. In 1966, he filed for bankruptcy, admitting he couldn't pay up. Desperate, he took promotional gigs in Europe and bit part cameos, a shadow of his former glory. When he died in 1980, all he left was a $10,000 insurance policy and some old furniture. No cash, no mansion. A stylish leading man gambled it all away. Proof even the smoothest stars can hit rock bottom. Number 19's story will blow you away. Number 19. Fatty Arbuckle Roscoe. Fatty Arbuckle was a silent comedy giant. Think slapstick stunts and $1 million smile. In 1920, Paramount signed him to $1 million a year deal, unheard of back then, making him one of Hollywood's richest funny men. His big frame and bigger laughs packed theaters. But in 1921, disaster struck. A wild party turned deadly when actress Virginia Rappe collapsed and died. Rumors pinned it on Fatty, accusing him of manslaughter. 3 high-profile trials followed. He was acquitted, but the damage was done. Legal fees soared to $700,000, around $13 million today. forcing him to sell his sprawling mansion and fleet of luxury cars just to breathe. Studios yanked his films. The public turned on him despite the not guilty verdict. Blacklisted, he was poisoned to producers. His pal Buster Keaton threw him a lifeline, sharing profits from his own flicks, but Fatty's comeback crawled, directing shorts under fake names, scraping by. By 1933, at 46, he died broke, his legacy smeared by scandal and crushed by debt. Once a king of laughs, he exited a pauper. Number 18's fall is a real gut punch. Number 18, John Barrymore. John Barrymore was theater royalty, born into the legendary Barrymore family, alongside siblings Ethel and Lionel, both stage icons in their own right. He owned Broadway in the early 1900s, delivering Shakespearean roles like Hamlet with a fiery passion that left audiences awestruck. Hollywood came calling, and he cashed in big with films like Grand Hotel and 32, top billing, top pay. But John's life was a runaway train of excess. He lived lavishly, think sprawling estates, endless parties, and drank like the bottle was his lifeline. Chronic alcoholism didn't just blur his days, it burned through his fortune. Add in multiple divorces, each one pricier than the last, and his finances crumbled. By 1937, creditors were circling. He filed for bankruptcy, drowning in unpaid bills. He kept acting, but the roles shrank, cheap flicks that mocked his once grand stature. Studios hesitated. Fans who'd adored him drifted away as his boozing worsened. By his death in 1942, at 60, he'd lost the regal shine. His estate couldn't settle the debts piling up. A titan of stage and screen, brought low by demons and dollars, his story's a stark warning. Number 17's collapse will shake you up. Number 17, Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge was a groundbreaking beauty, the first African-American woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar for Carmen Jones in '54. Her sultry voice and commanding presence lit up high-end nightclubs and movie screens, pulling in steady fame and solid paychecks through the '50s. But behind the glamour, her world was unraveling. Crooked financial advisors swindled her out of $150,000, a fortune back then, leaving her exposed. Then the IRS dropped a $139,000 tax bomb, claiming years of unpaid dues. Racial discrimination didn't help. Hollywood's bias slashed her roles, choking her income. Desperate, she sold her Hollywood home and placed her daughter in a state hospital. Heartbreaking moves to stay afloat. She turned to small club gigs, a far cry from the packed houses she once ruled. Bankruptcy in the early 60s offered no escape. Lawsuits and debts kept mounting. By 1965, she pinned hopes on a Mexico film gig to revive her career, but tragedy hit. She was found dead in a modest West Hollywood apartment, just 42. Her bank account? A measly $24. A trailblazer who dazzled the world, snuffed out by financial betrayal and systemic hurdles. Number 16's tale is wilder still. Number 16, Ed Wood.
Well, this is gonna look a lot better. We have to match it to the stock footage of the octopus underwater.
Ed Wood was Hollywood's king of camp. Low-budget flicks like Plan 9 from Outer Space and Glenn or Glenda earned him a quirky legacy in the 50s and 60s. He wasn't just a director, he hustled, churning out pulp novels and quickie screenplays for $700 to $1,000 a pop. Decent cash for the grind. But Ed lived on the edge. Most of that money flowed straight into bar tabs, fueling late-night benders. He and his wife bounced from one rundown apartment to the next. Eviction notices their constant shadow. His films flopped hard, box office poison, pushing old contacts away. He scraped by on even cheaper projects, dreaming of the big time. Friends heard him rant, "I should be a millionaire," but debt was his reality. In 1978, the sheriff tossed them out of a grimy, crime-riddled flat for unpaid rent. Ed dialed up old pals, begging for loans, silence on the line. Days later, crashed on a friend's couch. A heart attack took him at 54. No cash, no home. A visionary to some, a broke punchline to others. His final scene was pure tragedy. Number 15's story will hit you hard. Number 15, Billie Holiday.
You gonna help us out tonight?
What do you think I'm here for? What is he, boys?
New Orleans!
Billie Holiday, Lady Day, was jazz's soul in the 30s and 40s, her husky, heart-wrenching voice filling swanky venues from Harlem to Hollywood. Hits like Strange Fruit and God Bless the Child weren't just songs. They were raw, boundary-pushing cries that packed houses and commanded top fees. She had the world at her feet, but addiction dragged her down. Heroin and heavy drinking ate her earnings. Cash slipped through her fingers or into the hands of shady lovers and managers who bled her dry. A drug bust in 47 killed her New York cabaret card. No more lucrative club gigs, just theaters without liquor licenses, slashing her pay. As health faded, she found her record royalties had vanished. Old hits out of print, no safety net. Arrested again in May 1959 for possession, she spent her final days handcuffed to a hospital bed, dying at 44 that July. Her bank account? Just 70 cents. A voice that moved millions, silenced by exploitation and ruin. Genius couldn't save her from this financial abyss. Number 14's collapse is a wild twist. Number 14. Bud Abbott. Bud Abbott was half of comedy's golden duo. Abbott and Costello ruled Hollywood from 1940 to 56 with 36 films and routines like Who's on First that left audiences howling. At their peak, they were among the highest-paid stars, raking in fortunes from Universal hits, radio shows, and live gigs. But Bud's taste for the good life was insatiable. Extravagant homes, flashy cars, and gambling torched his share. He'd bet big on anything. Horses, cards, losing more than he won. After World War II, the IRS slammed them with a massive back tax bill. They had to sell prized assets, even the rights to their iconic films, just to stay afloat. By the mid-50s, their comedy mojo faded. Universal balked at their salary demands, ending a lucrative run. Lou Costello's death in 59 left Bud adrift. Solo gigs flopped, and health tanked. The IRS snatched his house. He went public, pleading for cash from fans who once roared for him. By 74, at 76, he died in near poverty. Debt's a bitter punchline to a laugh-filled legacy. A comedic titan brought low. Number 13's story will stun you. Number 13. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton was silent cinema's daredevil genius. Think jaw-dropping stunts and stone-faced charm in masterpieces like The General. In the 20s, he pulled $3,500 a week, big enough for a plush Beverly Hills estate, crafting films his way, a creative king. But in 28, he signed with MGM, trading freedom for a studio leash that dulled his spark. His style didn't fit their mold. Then came a brutal divorce from Natalie Talmadge. She took a chunk of his fortune, leaving him reeling. By 34, he filed for bankruptcy, listing just $112,000 in assets against a mountain of debt. His home gone, his spirit bruised. He slogged through forgettable B-movies, a far cry from his glory days. Yet Buster had grit. Later, he wrote and directed for others, snagged TV cameos, clawing back some cash and respect as historians rediscovered his work. Still, the old riches never returned. When he died in 66 at 70, he was hailed as a legend, but financial scars lingered, a shadow over a once unstoppable star. Number 12's fall is a real tearjerker. Number 12. Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard was the soul of the Supremes, Motown's golden girls who matched the Beatles' fame in the 60s. Her rich, powerhouse vocals, dubbed the group's backbone by boss Berry Gordy, drove smashes like Where Did Our Love Go and Baby Love. Big stages, bigger paydays, but trouble brewed. Group tensions, depression, and a growing alcohol habit wore her down. By 67, she was pushed out, replaced, her dreams fading fast. A solo deal with ABC Records fizzled. No hits, no traction. Legal battles, unpaid taxes, and paltry royalties from her glory days chipped away at her finances. By the early 70s, her family home was foreclosed. She turned to welfare, a crushing fall from sold-out arenas. She fought back with small gigs, plotting a comeback, but health crumbled. In 1976, at just 32, she died. Heart failure took her, leaving 3 kids and no savings. Once a queen of Motown's golden era, she departed under a dark financial cloud, a heartbreaking end for a voice that defined a generation. Number 11's tale will grab you tight. Number 11. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was Hollywood's eternal kid, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's top earner in the 30s and 40s, headlining the Andy Hardy series and films like Boys Town with boundless charm. Across 9 decades, 300-plus credits, he amassed a fortune. Millions flowed from his pint-sized energy and megawatt grin. But Mickey lived fast. 8 marriages, each divorce carving off chunks of cash, and lavish spending on homes, cars, you name it. Later, the story darkened. He testified to Congress in 2011, alleging elder abuse by a stepchild who siphoned his accounts, leaving him vulnerable in his 90s. By 2014, at 93, he passed away. Reports pegged his worth at a measly $18,000, a sliver of his past wealth. His estate sparked a messy fight between his wife and kids, mirroring the fractured family he left behind. A legend who lit up screens for nearly a century, his final act was dimmed by financial exploitation and excess. Proof fame's glow doesn't always bankroll the end. Number 10's collapse is a wild ride. Number 10. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was Disney's golden boy in the 40s and 50s, a cherub-faced star in live-action hits like Song of the South and Treasure Island, then the voice of Peter Pan in '53. At his peak, he pocketed $1,750 a week, huge for a kid, living the dream of every young actor. But adolescence flipped the script. Hollywood didn't want a gangly teen, and roles evaporated. A narcotics habit took root, gnawing at his health and bank account. Jail time for drug possession piled on legal fees and rehab costs. Comeback attempts crashed. Gigs were scarce. His sparkle gone. The industry that once cheered him now shunned him cold. By his 20s, he bolted to New York, chasing stage work. Nothing stuck. In 1968, at 31, his body turned up in a derelict East Village tenement. A mystery till fingerprints ID'd him months later. Penniless, alone, buried in an unmarked grave, a child star's fairy tale turned nightmare, a cautionary echo of fame's fleeting grip. Number 9's story will tug your heartstrings. Number 9. Cliff Edwards. Cliff Edwards, Ukulele Ike, was a 20s sensation, strumming his way to fame with a peppy Singing in the Rain long before the movie. His distinctive voice landed him in Hollywood, and in 1940, he became Jiminy Cricket in Disney's Pinocchio, a role that made him a household name. Cash rolled in from records and films, but Cliff couldn't hold it. 3 marriages fell apart, each with hefty alimony. He splurged on luxe living, fancy digs, fine clothes, unfazed by the Great Depression's bite. Gambling drained the rest. Cards and dice were his vice. Bankruptcies hit in the 30s and 40s. He scrambled for small acting bits and voice jobs to eat. Disney quietly paid some medical bills later, a nod to his Pinocchio legacy, but it wasn't enough. In 1971, at 76, he died a charity patient. No assets. His body slated for research till the Actors Fund stepped in for a modest burial. From stage lights to shadows, a voice of cheer faded to poverty. Number 8's collapse is a wild twist. Number 8, Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker was a global sensation. Fleeing America's racism, she stormed Paris in the 20s and 30s with jaw-dropping dance routines and a sultry voice that owned the stage. Banana skirts and all, she became Europe's darling, earning millions in today's dollars. Huge paydays for a black woman breaking barriers. But her life was as extravagant as her act. She adopted 12 kids, her rainbow tribe, and bought a sprawling French chateau, pouring cash into upkeep and her big-hearted causes. World War II gutted her bookings. Racially charged snubs stateside shrank her gigs too. Income dwindled, but spending didn't. She gave away fortunes to charity and friends. By 68, debts forced bankruptcy. She lost the chateau, her dream home, to creditors. Gritty as ever, she rallied. Princess Grace of Monaco backed a 75 Paris comeback. Sold out, glowing reviews, she was back. But days later, a cerebral hemorrhage struck. At 48, she was gone. A groundbreaking icon left a legacy of loss and debt. Her generosity outran her wallet. Number 7's story will shake you up. Number 7. Gary Coleman. Gary Coleman was TV's tiny titan. Arnold Jackson on Different Strokes, late 70s to early 80s, delivering What You Talkin' About, with a grin that won America's heart. Despite kidney disease stunting his size, he commanded adult star salaries, hundreds of thousands, plus endorsement deals, making him a child-acting juggernaut. But the money slipped away fast. His parents and managers mishandled it all. Gary sued them in '89 for fraud, exposing their greed. Millions gone. By the 90s, roles dried up. Hollywood doesn't love grown kid stars, and medical bills for his condition piled sky high. Bankrupt in '99, he leaned on cameos and reality TV scraps, confessing cash was tight. Public meltdowns, altercations, tabloid fodder marked his spiral. Personal tragedies stacked on. In 2010, at just 42, a fall and brain hemorrhage took him. Little of his fortune remained, eaten by lawsuits and health costs. A sitcom sensation reduced to a cautionary tale. Fame's fleeting sting hit hard. Number 6's collapse is a wild ride. Number 6. Donna Plato. Donna Plato was America's sitcom sweetheart. Kimberly Drummond on Different Strokes, beaming alongside Gary Coleman in the late 70s and early 80s. Her bright smile and perky charm made her a TV staple, raking in solid paychecks while the show soared. But when it ended, Hollywood slammed the door. Adult roles didn't come. The industry moved on. Bills stacked up fast. She grabbed low-budget films, even posed for adult magazines to scrape by. At one point, she worked a dry cleaning gig. Imagine that fall. Substance abuse dug the hole deeper, trashing her image and draining cash. In 1991, desperation peaked. She robbed a video store, a tabloid headline that screamed her collapse. Legal fees and rehab piled on. Modest comeback tries, like TV guest spots, flopped, nowhere near her old earnings. By 99, at just 34, addiction and debt claimed her. A drug overdose in an RV, broke and forgotten. A child star's shine snuffed out by harsh realities. Number 5's story will stun you. Number 5. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was Hollywood's swashbuckling god. Captain Blood in 35, The Adventures of Robin Hood in 38. Sword in hand, grin blazing, he owned the screen. Top-paid leading man, he lived like a pirate king. Yachts like the Zaka, multiple homes, parties that raged for days. But that lavish life came at a cost. He blew through millions. A 43 statutory rape trial, acquitted sure, racked up legal fees that stung hard. Booze, tobacco, and narcotics fueled his spiral. Divorce from actress Lily DeMita carved off more wealth. He tried indie films, like a doomed William Tell project, but investors bailed, sinking him deeper. By 59, health failing at 50, he hit Vancouver to lease his yacht for cash. Heart attack hit instead. The dashing star who thrilled millions died near broke, creditors circling his last dime. A wild legacy drowned in excess. Number 4's collapse is a gut punch. 4. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton burst onto late 40s Hollywood. $10,000 a week starring with Lloyd Bridges in Trapped and James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. Blonde, bold, she was a rising star with a bright future, until scandal torched it. A messy love triangle with actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal erupted. Neal beat Tone into a coma, headlines blared, and studios branded her box office poison. Roles vanished overnight. She scrambled for bit parts, anything to eat. By the 60s, desperation drove her to prostitution. Alcohol and drugs ravaged her body and whatever cash she scraped. In 1963, she penned a tell-all, I Am Not Ashamed, for $2,000. Pennies that couldn't save her. Heart and liver failure took her at 39 and 67. No money, quietly cremated, forgotten by the town that once cheered her. A promising light snuffed out by chaos. Number 3's tale will haunt you. Number 3. Marie Prevost. Marie Prevost was a silent film darling. Canadian-born, she charmed the 20s screen in comedies like The Marriage Circle, with director Ernst Lubitsch. Warner Brothers banked on her flirty sparkle. Hits rolled in, cash followed. But talkies flipped her world. Her voice didn't cut it, and studios shoved her to minor roles. Personal blows hit harder. Her mom died in 26. A bitter divorce followed, plunging her into depression. She drowned it in alcohol and food. Weight gain sidelined her from leads. By 35, she was down to bit parts, day wages in cheap films, living in dingy rentals with no cushion. In 37, at 40, she died alone, estate valued at $300. Her decline so stark it spurred Hollywood's aid fund, the motion picture Country House. A starlet's fall from grace. Number 2's story is pure tragedy. Number 2. Veronica Lake. Veronica Lake was the 40s film noir queen. Her peekaboo blonde locks and sultry vibe alongside Alan Ladd in classics like This Gun for Hire made her Wutu's siren. Studios adored her. Fans couldn't get enough. Cash flowed as her star soared. But trouble brewed. Alcoholism and a difficult rep turned producers off by the late 40s. Big roles faded. Debts, unpaid taxes, and rocky marriages ate her fortune. In 1951, the IRS seized her home. She and her husband filed bankruptcy, broke and scrambling. TV guest spots barely paid the bills. Depression deepened her drinking. By the 60s, she was a ghost, spotted waitressing in an NYC hotel bar, far from the spotlight. In 73, at 50, hepatitis and kidney failure took her. Alone in Vermont, penniless. A haunting end to a luminous icon. Number 1's The King of Falls. Number 1, Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, electrified the world, from 50s hits to Vegas residencies in the 70s. Estimates say he earned $100 million to $1 billion. Chart toppers, sold-out shows, pure gold. But Elvis spent like royalty. Dozens of Cadillacs gifted to pals, luxe homes, costumes that dazzled, even private jets. Manager Colonel Parker skimmed 50% of it. Mismanagement and $10 million in back taxes crushed him. Divorces and prescription drugs drained more. His grueling tour schedule propped up the facade. In 1977, at 42, he collapsed at Graceland. $5 million left, couldn't touch his debts. Priscilla flipped Graceland into a tourist cash cow, paying creditors posthumously, but Elvis died broke. Health shot, fortune gone. The king's throne toppled by excess. A finale that'll leave you reeling. Fame lit up these 22 Golden Age stars, but poverty snuffed them out. From silent screens to rock and roll, their tales of debt and despair hit hard. Which fall broke your heart? Drop it below, hit like, and subscribe. More Hollywood tragedies are coming your way.